I used to think silence was the worst kind of company. When you've spent years hearing laughter in the halls, footsteps in the kitchen, and the sound of loved ones calling your name, silence becomes unbearable. It echoes. It reminds you of everything that's gone. My name is Margaret, and at 78 years old, I had grown used to being invisible. Once upon a time, I was the woman everyone came to, the mother, the neighbor, the friend who always had a warm pie on the windowsill and a listening ear for anyone who needed it. But life, as it often does, changed slowly. Then all at once, the children moved away, one by one. Friends passed on. The neighborhood grew younger, louder, faster, and I stayed behind. They said I'd die alone, and part of me believed them. There's a strange kind of acceptance that comes with loneliness, a quiet resignation that tells you, maybe this is how it's supposed to end. I remember sitting on my porch one winter morning, wrapped in a blanket watching the snow fall. The world looked so peaceful, so detached from me. I thought about the days when my husband, Henry, would bring me coffee just the way I liked it. 2 sugars and a splash of cream. He'd smile and say, "You make life sweeter than the sugar ever could." That was 25 years ago. He's been gone ever since, and somehow the coffee never tasted right after that. Most days, I barely spoke to anyone. The postman was the only human contact I had, and even he barely made eye contact anymore. I used to write letters to my children, long, heartfelt ones, but weeks turned into months without replies. The last time I heard from my eldest, he said, "Mom, we're just so busy these days. We'll come visit soon." That was 3 years ago. The word soon can become a kind of lie you tell to make yourself feel better. Then, one day, everything changed, but not in a grand, cinematic way. It began with a knock, a soft, uncertain knock on the door that startled me because, frankly, no one ever knocked anymore. I hesitated. For a moment, I thought it might be a mistake. Maybe someone had the wrong address. But the knock came again, firmer this time, and a voice followed. "Mrs. Turner? I'm sorry to bother you. I'm Daniel from next door." I hadn't realized anyone had moved into the old Jenkins place. I opened the door just a crack, cautious. Standing there was a young man, probably in his 30s, with tired eyes and a hesitant smile. He held a small box in his hands. "I think this was delivered to us by mistake," he said, handing it to me. It was a package of knitting yarn, something I'd ordered weeks ago, but forgotten about. I thanked him, expecting him to leave right away, but instead he looked around awkwardly and said, "I hope I'm not intruding, but my oven broke, and I was wondering if I could bake something here." "Just a pie. It's my daughter's birthday tomorrow." It had been so long since anyone asked me for help that I almost didn't know how to respond. But something inside me lit up, a spark I hadn't felt in years. "Of course," I said, my voice trembling. "Come in." He stepped inside, carrying a small bowl of pie filling and a crust he'd made by hand. "My wife used to do this," he said quietly. "She passed away last year. I'm not great at baking, but my little girl says Mom's pies were magic, so I'm trying to keep that going." Something about the way he said that hit me hard. We didn't speak for a while as I preheated the oven and showed him where the mixing spoons were. The smell of cinnamon and sugar filled the kitchen, blending with memories of the past. I told him how Henry used to insist on extra nutmeg, how the kids would steal pieces of crust before it was even baked. Daniel smiled, and for the first time in a long time, I saw life in my kitchen again. When the pie was done, he thanked me sincerely, almost emotionally. "You have no idea how much this means," he said. "It's just nice to talk to someone who understands." After he left, the house felt different. Still quiet, but not empty. I could still smell the pie. I could still feel his gratitude in the air. That night, I didn't go to bed feeling forgotten. I went to bed remembering what it felt like to matter. Days passed. Then, a week later, another knock came. Daniel again, this time with his daughter, Lily. She was a tiny thing, maybe 8, with bright eyes and a shy smile. "Mrs. Turner," he said, "Lily wanted to thank you for helping with the pie." The little girl handed me a drawing, a picture of 3 people at a table, with the words, "Thank you for making Daddy smile again." I didn't know what to say. I just hugged her. From then on, they came often, sometimes to borrow sugar, sometimes just to talk. Lily would sit at my table, drawing pictures while I knitted. And Daniel would tell stories about his late wife, about how hard it had been raising a daughter alone. I shared my stories too, about Henry, about my children, about how time can be both kind and cruel. We laughed, we cried, and little by little, that empty space in my heart began to fill again. People still said I'd die alone. Maybe they still whispered that behind my back. But they didn't know that life sometimes gives you family where you least expect it. And though I didn't know it then, that stranger, that young man who knocked on my door, would change the course of my final years forever. Over the next few months, Daniel and Lily became a part of my routine, though it didn't feel like a routine at all. It felt alive. Every Sunday, they'd come over for breakfast. I'd make pancakes, and Lily would pour far too much syrup while Daniel tried to stop her, laughing helplessly. It reminded me of when my own children were that age, before phones and careers and distance took them away. Sometimes I'd catch myself calling Lily by my daughter's name and she'd giggle and say, "I'm not Emily." And I'd laugh and apologize. But secretly, I didn't mind the slip. Maybe it was my heart remembering what it felt like to be a mother again. One afternoon, while we were in the garden planting tulips, Daniel told me more about his life. He'd been an engineer, working long hours until his wife, Sarah, was diagnosed with cancer. When she passed, he said quietly, his hands still in the dirt, I thought I'd lost everything. My parents are gone, and most of my friends stopped calling. It was just me and Lily. I didn't realize how lonely I'd become until the day I knocked on your door. I felt a lump in my throat. For a moment, I saw myself in him. That same look of quiet endurance that people wear when they've been through too much loss. You know, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, sometimes the people who've lost the most end up finding each other. He looked at me, smiled faintly, and nodded. Maybe that's true. We worked in silence for a while after that, the sound of the shovel cutting through earth blending with birdsong. It was peaceful, healing, the kind of moment you don't realize is precious until it's gone. Later that evening, after they left, I looked around the house. For the first time in years, there were fresh flowers on the table, children's drawings taped to the fridge, and 2 mugs in the sink instead of 1. My home looked lived in again. And for the first time, I wasn't just surviving each day. I was looking forward to the next one. But not everyone saw it that way. One morning, as I was making tea, the phone rang. It was my youngest son, Mark. His voice sounded forced, polite, but distant. "Hey, Mom, how are you?" he asked, the way someone asks out of obligation, not care. "I'm doing fine, dear," I said, smiling even though he couldn't see me. "I've made some new friends. My neighbors, a lovely man and his daughter." There was a pause. Then, in that sharp tone I knew too well, he said, "Mom, you really shouldn't be letting strangers into your house. You can't trust people these days." I bit my tongue. He hadn't called in months, and now he was giving me advice about trust? I wanted to tell him that kindness isn't a transaction. It's a gift. But instead, I just said, "They're good people, Mark. Don't worry about me." He sighed. "All right, if you say so. Anyway, we've been busy. Maybe we'll visit in the summer." Summer. Always. Maybe. Always someday. I knew what that meant. He wouldn't come. None of them would. That evening, Daniel noticed something was off. We were having dinner together, leftover stew and bread. He asked, gently, "You okay?" I smiled, but my eyes betrayed me. "Just my son." He nodded slowly. "Does he call often?" "Not really," I admitted. "They've all got their own lives now. I guess that's how it goes." Lily looked up from our plate and said innocently, "But we come, Mrs. Turner." I laughed, tears pricking my eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, you do." After dinner, Daniel stayed to help wash the dishes. He looked thoughtful, then said, "You know, maybe it's not about who's related to you by blood. Maybe it's about who chooses to show up." His words lingered with me long after he left. I thought about Henry, how we'd built a family out of love and trust, not obligation. And I realized Daniel was right. Family isn't who you're born to. It's who stands beside you when the world forgets you exist. Weeks passed, and our bond grew stronger. We became a team of sorts, fixing up my old house together, one small project at a time. Daniel repaired the creaky porch steps, and Lily helped me repaint the garden fence white. It looked beautiful, like something out of a memory. Then one day, I heard a rumor in town. People had started talking, whispering really. They said it was strange how much time Daniel spent with me, that it wasn't normal for a young widower to be visiting an old woman so often. Small towns have a way of twisting kindness into suspicion. I tried to ignore it, but the words found their way to Daniel too. He showed up one afternoon, looking tired and upset. "I heard what people are saying," he said. "If you want, I'll stop coming by. I don't want to cause trouble for you." The idea of him not coming, of losing that warmth again, was unbearable. "Don't you dare," I said, my voice firmer than I'd intended. "Let them talk. They don't understand what this friendship means." He stared at me for a moment, then smiled. "You sound like my mother." "Maybe I am," I said softly. That night, as I sat alone after they left, I thought about all the labels people throw at others. Widow, old, lonely, weak. They think those words define you, but they don't. Not if you refuse to let them. Daniel and Lily didn't see me as someone waiting to die. They saw me as someone who still had stories left to live, and I was beginning to believe it too. But I didn't know then that soon life was about to test everything we'd built. Because sometimes when happiness finally finds its way back into your life, the world has a cruel way of seeing how much you're willing to fight to keep it. And I was about to find out just how strong I really was. A few weeks later, I woke up to the sound of pounding on my door. It was early, far too early for anyone to be visiting. My heart jumped. When I opened the door, two of my neighbors stood outside, faces tight with discomfort. "Mrs. Turner," one of them said, avoiding my eyes. "You should know that your children are back in town." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "My children?" "Yes. They were at the cafe this morning. I heard them talking about you, something about that man and his little girl." I felt my stomach drop. Of course, word had gotten to them. They probably believed every rumor the town had to offer. That afternoon, as if summoned by gossip itself, my eldest son Peter showed up. He hadn't been here in over a year. He stood in my doorway, impeccably dressed, frowning at the flower pots Daniel and I had placed by the steps. "So it's true," he said without so much as a greeting. "You've got some widower hanging around here all the time?" I stared at him. "His name is Daniel. He's my neighbor, and he's been a great help to me." Peter crossed his arms. "Help? Mom, people are talking. Don't you realize how that looks? An old woman letting a strange man and his kid into her home?" I felt a flash of anger, the kind I hadn't felt in years. "Peter, I am an old woman, yes, but I am not helpless. Daniel is a good man. He treats me with kindness, something you might try sometime." He blinked, stunned. I think it was the first time I'd ever spoken to him like that. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice, "we're just worried. You're not young anymore. You could be taken advantage of." I smiled, a tired, bitter smile. Taken advantage of? Peter. The only people who've ever done that to me are standing right in front of me. He looked away, jaw tight. "We'll talk about this later," he muttered before leaving. I closed the door, trembling, part fury, part sadness. They'd never cared about my loneliness before, only about appearances, about what people might think. When Daniel came by that evening, he could see something was wrong. "They came, didn't they?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "They think you're after something," he sighed. "I'm sorry, Margaret. Maybe I should stay away for a while. Let things cool down." The thought hurt more than I wanted to admit. "If that's what you think is best," I said softly, though my heart was screaming the opposite. For the next few days, the house felt emptier than ever. No laughter, no little feet running across the floor, just silence. That same cold, hollow silence I'd known before Daniel came into my life. Then, one night, it all came to a head. There was another knock at my door. This time, all three of my children stood there. Peter, Mark, and Emily. They'd come together, like some sort of intervention. "Mom," Emily began, her tone careful, "we think it's time you move into assisted living. It's safer, and you won't have to rely on strangers." I froze. "Rely on strangers?" I said, my voice trembling. "You mean the people who actually show up? The ones who knock on my door to check on me? The ones who remember my birthday without a calendar reminder?" "Mom, don't make this harder," Peter said, stepping forward. "We just want what's best for you." "What's best for me?" I laughed bitterly. Where were you when I fell last winter and couldn't get up for an hour? When the roof leaked, who came to fix it? You didn't even know, did you? Their faces fell silent. No one spoke. You think Daniel's taking advantage of me? Maybe he is. By giving me friendship, by reminding me that I'm still alive, that I still matter. Tell me, which one of you has done that lately? Emily's eyes filled with tears, but Peter just shook his head. You're being emotional. You don't know what's good for you anymore. That did it. I stood as tall as my old back would allow and said, Then get out. All of you. Get out of my house. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Mark muttered something under his breath, and they left. The door closed behind them, and I sank into my chair, exhausted but strangely free. Later that night, I sat in the quiet, tears streaming down my face, not because I was sad, but because I'd finally said what needed to be said. For years, I'd let their neglect eat away at me. But now I'd drawn a line. The next morning, I went to Daniel's. He opened the door, surprised. I thought you didn't want to see me, he said. I smiled faintly. I didn't say that. I just didn't want to cause trouble for you. But I've realized something, Daniel. I've spent too much of my life worrying about what others think. It's time I start living again, on my terms. He looked at me for a moment, then grinned. In that case, he said, how do you feel about coming with us on a little road trip this weekend? I blinked. Road trip? Lily's been begging to see the ocean. We're heading up the coast. You should come. I hesitated, but then I thought about the empty house, the silence, the loneliness I'd endured for so long. And then I thought about laughter, sunlight, and the sound of waves. I nodded. All right, I said. Let's go see the ocean. That weekend changed everything. The first time I saw the sea in years, I cried. Not because I was sad, but because it reminded me that the world was still vast, still full of beauty, and I was still a part of it. Lily held my hand as we stood on the sand, waves rushing over our feet, and Daniel took a photo of us. 3 souls who'd all lost something, yet somehow found each other. When I looked at that photo later, I realized something simple but powerful. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by love, loyalty, and the courage to show up when it matters most. And maybe, just maybe, that's what life had been trying to teach me all along. The weeks after that trip were some of the happiest I'd had in years. Daniel and Lily became a regular part of my life. We'd have breakfast together on my porch, watch the sunsets with a pot of tea, and sometimes just sit in silence, content with each other's company. Lily would run through my garden chasing butterflies, laughing like pure sunshine. Every time I looked at her, I felt a kind of warmth that made the years melt away. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring. I wasn't checking the mailbox hoping for a letter that would never come. I was living again, fully, deeply, joyfully. Then one morning, as I was pruning the roses, a black car pulled into my driveway. It wasn't Daniel's. My heart sank when I saw Peter step out, dressed in his usual polished suit, holding a clipboard. Mom, he said, walking over stiffly. We need to talk. I wiped my hands on my apron. About what? He glanced around the garden, frowning at the toys Lily had left scattered. About your will. I raised an eyebrow. My will? Yes. You've been making decisions lately that, well, concern us. We just want to be sure everything's in order before something happens. I stared at him in disbelief. Before something happens? Peter, I'm not dead yet, he sighed impatiently. You're 78, Mom. You've had health scares. It's only responsible to make sure your affairs are handled properly. I folded my arms. And by handled properly, you mean making sure you get your share, don't you? His face tightened. That's not fair. No, Peter, I said quietly. What's not fair is you showing up only when money's involved. He started to argue, but then Daniel stepped out from around the side of the house, carrying a basket of vegetables from his garden. Everything okay here? He asked. Peter turned, his tone instantly cold. Oh, so this is him. The neighbor. Daniel nodded politely. That's right. I'm the neighbor who's been helping your mother since you stopped coming around. Peter glared at him, then turned back to me. Mom, this is exactly what I mean. You're letting people into your life who could be manipulating you. I laughed bitterly. Manipulating me? Daniel's given me more care and kindness in a few months than you have in years. His jaw clenched, but before he could speak again, I said, "You can go now, Peter. I'll handle my own affairs as I always have." He hesitated, then finally left, muttering something about making a mistake you'll regret. When the car disappeared down the road, Daniel turned to me. "I'm sorry, Margaret. I didn't mean to cause trouble." I shook my head. "Don't apologize. The trouble was there long before you." Still, that conversation stirred something inside me, a mix of anger and clarity. That evening, I sat at my desk, pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, and started rewriting my will. I thought long and hard about what truly mattered. My children would get something, of course. I wasn't spiteful. But the house, the garden, the savings I'd built, those would go towards something more meaningful. I decided to leave a portion to the local community center, where lonely seniors gathered to share meals, another portion to Lily's future education, and a small trust for Daniel, not because he needed it, but because I wanted him to know how much his friendship had changed my life. When it was done, I signed it, sealed it, and placed it in my lawyer's envelope with a note that read, "For those who stood by me, not for what I had, but for who I was." Days passed, peace returned, until one afternoon, Emily called for the first time in months. "Mom," she said hesitantly, "Peter told us you're rewriting your will. Is that true?" "Yes, it's true," I said calmly. She went quiet. Then, softly, "Mom, we're worried. We don't want you making rash decisions." "Rash?" I repeated. "Emily, I've had a lifetime to think about who truly loves me. I'm not being rash. I'm being honest." She didn't know what to say. So I added, "I hope you and your brothers are doing well. Truly, I do. But please stop worrying about my money. Worry about the kind of people you're becoming." After that, I didn't hear from any of them again for weeks. Then, one morning, I woke up to find my mailbox stuffed with letters, legal ones. My children were contesting my will before I was even gone. I sat in my chair, staring at the papers, shaking my head in disbelief. I'd always known they cared more about inheritance than affection, but seeing it laid out in ink was a different kind of pain. Daniel came by that afternoon and found me crying quietly over the letters. "Let me guess," he said, scanning the envelopes. "Family trouble again?" I nodded, wiping my eyes. "They're trying to take away something I haven't even finished living for." He knelt beside me, placing a comforting hand on mine. "Then maybe it's time you showed them they can't define your worth or your happiness." His words lingered long after he left. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked around the house, touching the walls, the old photographs, the windowsills I'd painted decades ago. This home wasn't just a building, it was my story, and no one was going to erase it. The next day, I made a call to my lawyer. "I want to finalize everything," I told him. "And I want to make one addition." He asked what that was. "I want a clause added," I said firmly, "that ensures no one can change or challenge my wishes once I'm gone. If they try, they forfeit everything." He paused, then chuckled softly. "You've thought this through, haven't you?" I smiled faintly. "I've had a lot of quiet time to think lately." After that, I hung up and sat back, feeling a deep calm settle over me. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control, not just of my house or my will, but of my own story. That evening, Daniel and Lily came by with dinner, soup, bread, and a small bouquet of wildflowers. As we ate together, Lily looked up at me and said, "Grandma Margaret, did you know flowers grow better when someone talks to them every day?" I chuckled. "Is that so?" "Uh-huh," she said, nodding seriously. "Because love helps them grow." Her innocent words hit me harder than she could have known. Love helps them grow. Maybe that's what I'd been missing all those years. Not love itself, but the courage to receive it. That night as I watched them leave, I whispered to myself, I may not have the family I once dreamed of, but I have one that chose me. And that's something far greater. Winter came slowly that year, wrapping the town in a soft, quiet stillness. The trees outside my window stood bare, their branches painted with frost, and the air carried that crisp scent of change, the kind that reminded me of both endings and beginnings. Daniel still visited every few days, often bringing Lily bundled up in a bright red coat. They'd help me with the firewood, and we'd sit by the hearth sipping hot cocoa. Those moments filled the space my children had long since abandoned, not with noise, but with warmth. One evening, as the snow fell in gentle flakes, Daniel asked me, "Do you ever regret it, the way things turned out with your children?" I stared into the fire for a long time before answering. I regret the years I spent waiting for them to love me the way I loved them. But I don't regret waking up to the truth. Sometimes, Daniel, it takes a lifetime to realize who your real family is. He nodded quietly, understanding in his eyes. A few days later, I received a letter. It wasn't from a lawyer this time, but from Emily. The handwriting was shaky, hesitant. I opened it, my heart beating faster than I wanted to admit. "Mom," it began, "I don't know if you'll even read this. I've been thinking about what you said, about what kind of people we've become. You were right. I'm sorry. I let money, appearances, and other people's opinions matter more than you. I don't know how to fix everything, but if you'll let me, I'd like to try." My eyes blurred as I read the words over and over. For the first time in a long time, there was a flicker of hope. Not forgiveness, not yet, but hope. When Daniel came by the next morning, I showed him the letter. He smiled. "Looks like she finally remembered what matters." "Maybe," I said softly. "Or maybe she finally realized what she lost." The following weekend, Emily came to visit. She stood at my doorway, looking smaller than I remembered, not physically, but in spirit. She hesitated before saying, "Hi, Mom." I smiled faintly. "Come in, Emily. It's cold out." We sat in the kitchen, the same place where I'd once taught her how to bake cookies. At first, our conversation was awkward, filled with long silences and half-finished sentences. But then she started talking, really talking. She told me about her life, her struggles, her regrets, how she'd followed in Peter's footsteps for years because it was easier than standing alone. I listened quietly, letting her words wash over me. When she finally finished, tears welled up in her eyes. "I can't change the past, Mom, but I can do better now, if you'll let me." I reached across the table, took her trembling hand, and said, "You don't need my permission to do better. You just need to start." For the first time in decades, I saw my daughter smile. A real, genuine smile. Over the next few months, Emily began visiting regularly. She helped me with errands, joined Daniel and Lily for dinners, and even planted new flowers in the garden come spring. Peter and Mark stayed distant, though occasionally I'd get polite emails from them, short, businesslike, as if affection were a transaction. I didn't expect more. I had already made peace with that. Life settled into a quiet rhythm. The house that once echoed with loneliness now hummed with laughter, conversation, and the sound of Lily's little footsteps. I sometimes caught myself thinking, if this is the end of my story, it's a beautiful one. Then one day, a letter arrived from the community center. They'd received my contribution and wanted to name their new reading room after me, the Margaret Whitmore Room for Lifelong Learning. I chuckled when I read it. All those years I'd thought my legacy would be my children. But perhaps it was something else entirely. The kindness I'd passed forward. The hearts I'd touched without even realizing. A few weeks later, Daniel came over with an envelope in his hand. "Lily drew this for you," he said, smiling. Inside was a crayon drawing. 3 people, me, Daniel, and Lily, standing under a big yellow sun holding hands. Above it, in shaky letters, she'd written, "My family." I stared at it for a long moment, then felt tears prick my eyes. "She's right, you know," I whispered. "Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who shares your heart." That night, after they left, I placed Lily's drawing in a frame on the mantel beside my favorite photograph. One from years ago, when my children were still small and life seemed simple. The 2 pictures stood side by side, past and present, both a part of me. In the months that followed, my health began to decline. Nothing sudden, just the slow, inevitable fading that comes with age. But I wasn't afraid. I'd made peace with my life. I'd learned that forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation, and that love, when given freely, finds its way back in unexpected forms. One evening, as the sunset painted the sky in gold and lavender, Emily sat beside me on the porch. "You know," she said softly, "I used to think strength meant never needing anyone. But you've shown me that strength is knowing when to let people in." I smiled. Then I suppose we both learned something. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I love you, Mom. It had been so long since I'd heard those words from her. I looked at her, tears brimming, and said, I love you too, sweetheart. When she left that night, I sat for a long time, watching the stars appear one by one. My body was tired, but my heart was light. A few weeks later, I passed peacefully in my sleep, not alone, not forgotten, but surrounded by the love I'd cultivated in my final years. When my lawyer read the will, my children were stunned. The house went to the community center, as planned. The funds for Lily's education were safeguarded, and Daniel received a small but meaningful token of gratitude. But it was the final note that silenced the room. For those who seek love, give it. For those who crave family, create it. And for those who think wealth defines worth, may they one day learn that the richest hearts are those that give without asking in return. Weeks later, Daniel, Emily, and little Lily gathered in the community center's new reading room, now open to the public. A plaque hung on the wall, in memory of Margaret Whitmore, who taught us that love is the greatest inheritance. Daniel ran his fingers over the inscription and smiled. She got the last word after all. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. And the best one, too.